In this video, we're going to be talking to my pastor, a pastor who has been in the trenches during this whole COVID-19 thing. We're going to talk about the decisions to come back and start regathering and the differences between talking to a camera and to an audience.
Waiting for perfection never got anything done. You just have to start.
3, 2.
So with us today, I've got Justin. I mean, he's, kind of my right-hand man in this whole thing. Even though he's like in the center of the screen, he's still the right-hand man. I guess he's actually to my right, so that actually makes it. Hi, Justin. How you doing?
What's going on, Dave? Glad to be here wherever I am. It's always good to be here with you.
It's good to have you here, and we have Doctor. He always makes me call him Doctor. It's a whole thing. Dr. Jared Wellman, who is the pastor of Tate Springs Baptist Church, which is my church. And throughout the shows that we've been doing and the videos and stuff, you've heard me talk about our church and, point to some of the things that we've been doing as an example. And a lot of that is happening like right at the direction or with Jared and I hand in hand in kind of working in the field together and trying to put things together. Jared, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So with the pandemic happening and everyone staying at home, we've had to take to the internet and take to online avenues to get the gospel out to not only our people, but also to our communities and the world over. How has this time of uncertainty and this time of sheltering impacted your church, and how have you responded?
I would say it's impacted Tate Springs the way it's impacted most every church. There's been there was a lot of uncertainty at the beginning. It's been said 1,000 times now that this was something that no seminary prepared any of us for, because there's no way to prepare us for it or even some forethought to do that. And so for us, it's impacted us. Really, there were financial concerns and then connection concerns as far as staying connected to everybody, making sure that our people were all accounted for in some capacity, and just the things that everyone struggled with. And there was a lot of concern about how that was going to look. And so we've just been navigating our way day by day, trying to make sure that every day we're remembering things and learning from other people as well.
I remember when everything was first starting to look like things were going to be changing, and that first week, earlier in that week, like at the very beginning of the week, you and I had talked about, hey, we're going to just extend spring break, and then extend, that schedule that we have, which was a very minimalist schedule for Sunday afternoons and evenings and during the week, because everybody's traveling, which made sense. So we thought it was going to be an extension. And I was amazed at how the cascade went, to stripping away, it felt, and then the need for us to build things up. So
sure.
Once we started coming up with the idea of doing everything virtual, and how are we going to replace Sunday school interactions? How are we going to replace, the women's Bible study, the men's Bible study, the youth group especially, all that sort of stuff. We started tackling a whole lot of that. One of the things that I saw, Jared, you and I, we've done a lot of video together over the years. We've done a lot of promos and, some one-on-one teaching and stuff like that, video, classes and stuff that we're working on putting together. I know I've watched you actually get a lot more comfortable being on camera and talking to a camera. And I see you in the pulpit all the time as well. I know there's a lot of pastors out there and church leaders that especially the ones that haven't even embraced anything more than recording their sermons on cassette tapes or CD or doing a podcast of it or something.
What's a cassette tape?
Do what?
So what's a cassette tape?
Yeah, I know there's one person watching this still knows what that is. But I know that Justin and I have met a lot of church people that have said, in fact, we had one actually join our group that said we were never going to live stream or do video at our church, and everything changed and all that. So, what kind of a lot of pastors, what kind of struggles have been happening and I'm not talking about the financial struggles and stuff. I'm just talking about the logistics and the reality of like preaching to a room of 300 people or a room of 100 people versus preaching to, what we hate seeing, which is a completely empty sanctuary and one person
Sure.
on the stage and just nothing but a bunch of hollow noise?
Yeah, so there was a lot of things that I was reminded of. Everything's been so fast and furious through all of this that I think it's going to take a lot of unpacking once all this is done. But so let me just kind of carry us through where we were and where we are and where we're going. First off, yeah, whenever it hit the fan, I mean, I just traveled to New York like 2 weeks before. And I remember being in New York and kind of seeing the storm on the horizon. And we were even afraid when we were going to New York. We didn't know what was going to happen. We had no idea the big pandemic or the quarantine was going to happen. And so early on, what we did is I remember watching everything and kind of monitoring what churches in our community were doing and monitoring our area. And then we had to make what was really a controversial decision. On, I think, Friday, we decided to strip some things like small groups and children's church. And then on Saturday morning, we decided to close the campus for that Sunday. And that was a hard thing. And so I remember sitting in this room spending all day for like 3 days in a row, just researching, communicating, and communicating to our leadership and then communicating to our staff. And that was a really, really important thing. So if there's one thing that I could share with pastors when it comes to all this, is that your messaging is important. And that's where I've really benefited from other pastors, is just, kind of crowdsourcing and researching and reading articles and blogs and having conversations about how you're communicating what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think that most people, even if they disagree with what you're doing, as long as they see why you're doing it, they'll support you. And our church has been overwhelmingly supportive through this. I've been, to be honest with you, I've just been really blown away by our church. And the good news about all of this, it's not really good news, but it's good news in the midst of the bad news, is that one saving grace is that everybody's experienced this. This has not been like a localized situation to
Right.
one church or to one community. Whenever the entire population of the planet Earth is walking through this together, it changes the narrative, and that's where it's been unprecedented for us. Now, as far as what it's looked like for how that we've transitioned into what we did with online church is, I would say that one thing that we did that I felt like worked really well for us is that we didn't make any long-term decisions until we had to. And so, for example, when we closed, we waited until the last minute, but not too late.
Right.
It's kind of like we treated it like inclement weather. So if there was a tornado, we that may or may not come, we waited until there's a point of no return where it's like, if the tornado came, you have to think about not communicating too late in the day to close and cancel services. Mm-hmm. So we made that decision Saturday morning. That way we could get the word out and everything. We treated the first Sunday like that. Then it was week to week because we still didn't know. Well, then when we realized that this wasn't changing, that's when we said, okay, now we have to come up with a long-term strategy, which was an indefinite strategy. And that's where we went online only. And we just communicated that as we went. And again, the fact that it was a pandemic was helpful because everybody was going through it. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, it wasn't as controversial anymore. We were in the throw with everyone else. But yeah, I would say that, Dave, this, 3 years ago when I got here, we didn't have we had an online presence, but it was like people were peering into, they were watching from the outside in. Mm-hmm, and then we started immediately. One of the first things we did is we created a video room, and we started infusing, video technology into our services with video announcements rather than live announcements. Right. We would promote Bible studies with videos, and that prepared us for this. It prepared me for it because I was in front of the camera, a lot for different things. And so I would say that that was helpful for us. Now, I think you had asked the question, and maybe you could rephrase it so I make sure I'm answering it in the way that's most helpful. But the idea of speaking to a camera versus a room.
Yeah, there's what I am witnessing, and what a lot of us and you and I have had these conversations, and some of our other staff have had these as well. And Justin and I keep hammering it with our audience, is that there's a different thing that happens if we step back and we take a look at at what it is we do from an objective standpoint, okay? Whether it's a ministry, whether we're a business or what really is irrelevant for this. What we're doing is we're producing a live event every single week. Every Sunday, we're doing a live conference. We're doing a live event that has breakout sessions generally, and workshops, which is Sunday school and life groups and whatever you want to call them. We have a small concert that opens up our event. We have a keynote address. And then we have maybe a little bit more of that concert. And then we have meet and greet stuff that happens in the hallways and networking and stuff that happens in the hallways after. So you and I have been to conferences that is that exact same formula. That is what happens around the world. And it's also the format that we use for church. So when we've been live streaming it, for me, it seems that we've always, everybody, has always been, we put a camera there to catch what's going on, and that everything that's being done in that event for that Sunday morning is happening for the people in the room and inside that building. So the music is played, the stage is set, the eyes are addressing an audience right here. When there's laughter, maybe there's a camera that shows people laughing or something, but everything is done with the focus being the people in the room. Whereas when we watch a television show like whatever, The Big Bang Theory or The Office or a TV drama or something, everything is done for the viewer. So the cameras are closer, the shots are closer. You get those shots where, if one person says something, as they're saying it, they may cut to a reaction shot of the other person. All these sort of things to convey the event that's happening, the story that's happening for the viewer. And now we've moved from, by force, we've moved from we're streaming this live event that's happening to we have to produce content for people that are sitting at home. And I've seen a lot of churches, in my opinion, that have aesthetically, and I even think communicatively, been under the wire on a lot of that, and have not necessarily met it because they keep that old format. And I think it, especially if you're in a situation where the camera's in the back of the room and it's not zoomed up enough, and people are used to seeing the tops of heads and the backs of heads and hands waving and things like that during this time, they're not seeing any of that, yet the pastor is continuing to talk like that. So we've always been saying, look, you got to get the camera up close. You've got to, even if it means taking it and putting it up on the stage, and the pastor, if he has to hide behind the pulpit, turn sideways and lean on the pulpit and talk to the camera, just because you've got an audience that you have to communicate to and they need to see your eyes. So I'm curious how we should handle that coming back, because it's like everybody wants to just get back to church and get things back to normal and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal question. So the phrase we keep hearing is, let's get back to normal. And, and then some people go on the other extreme and say, well, normal's gone. I would say that both are pretty extreme. I don't think normal's gone, but I don't think we're going to get back to normal. I think it's going to be somewhere in between. And so, Dave and I, we're already having those conversations at Tate Springs. And I think that one thing I would say that pastors can be thinking about now, number one, is to realize this, that that it will look differently. And I think that we were already moving this way. We've just been propelled forward or thrusted forward pretty dramatically in the last couple of months, where people now have an appetite for online outreach or online church. That's not going to go away. We've gone beyond the habit of it now. I think a habit is like X amount of days. We're way beyond
21
that.
or 30 days.
And so I think that, one thing we need to think through is the fact that a lot of our people are going to have an online appetite. And what we need to do is think about what opportunities do we have right now when we're coming back to create new rhythms and new normals in our church. And so what we're going to do is we are going to, like right now, I think some churches have, when they went online, it was like, I'm going to keep preaching as if there are people in the room to try to keep a sense of normal. And that's fine if that's reaching your people or not. I would push back on that. And I think Jimmy Fallon actually has probably done the best job. And this is what I would say if I'm giving advice is address the elephant in the room, which is that things are not normal. And so what we're going to do on our first Sunday back on the 24th is we're just going to open up the service and we're going to say, listen, this is different. We're not going to try to pretend that it's the same. We're not just opening the doors and it's not going to be normal. And that's just the reality of it. And so we're going to enter into a hybrid kind of ministry where I'm not going to ignore the people online, but I'm also not going to ignore the people in the room. And it's kind of what we do on Wednesdays, Dave, which is, and I actually was inspired by how to handle this by watching how Jimmy Fallon has handled it, which is to have production, like high level production. So you don't just want to have, you don't want to just throw all that out the window, but you also don't want to act like everything's perfectly and normal and lie to people,
right.
Close the drapes and act like it's not raining.
Right.
And so, whenever I'm speaking to the camera, I literally treat it like it's another person in the room. So right now I have you, Dave, on the left of my screen and Justin, you on the right. And my eyes want to keep going to you, but my camera's on the left. And so when I'm talking to you, I'm actually having to look at a little bitty dot on my phone to make it, to actually talk to you. Otherwise, It looks like I'm, looking off to the side over here or whatever.
All right.
And it's literally for me. This is all. I'm not like a big, media guru. I mean, we're a mid-sized church in the Metroplex, but I'll say this: it's me just forcing myself to say that camera is a person and it represents however many people, hundreds of people, whatever. And I'm just gonna look at that camera and talk to the camera as if it's a human being. And that's, and I think that's landing a little bit with our people. And so that's how we're walking through it. We're going to set up the camera on stage and I'm going to talk to the camera and then I'm going to address the people and do a hybrid and we'll see how that works. And then just let people know, hey, this is not normal right now. And that's okay.
Yeah. When it comes to, like marketing and shooting video and doing things like that, we always want to have that know, like, and trust. The audience, the people that you're talking about, you want to create that relationship with them through your message, or in your case, you're a story brand guide, so you use story to help build that connection with people for that know, like, and trust. In video and in photography, we always want to use our eyes. That's the thing. If they can't see your eyes, if they can't see the whites of your eyes, then they can't connect with you. There's that old adage that the eyes are the window to the soul, and I think that's there's a lot of truth to that. When you have a conversation with somebody, if that person is constantly looking up in the other direction, you don't think they're paying attention to you. You don't think they're addressing you. And I think especially now, and I want to encourage all churches and ministries, especially now, in this time when some people are getting out, some people are having to stay home or keep themselves separated from society at large. That's very, very, it's not even very important, it's crucial that we maintain as much of that connection with everybody that we can. And one way to do it is by using video. I mean, Jared, we've at our church, we've used video for all of our connection, basically. I mean, we send emails and we put stuff in Facebook and all that. But when it comes to our Bible studies, when it comes to our meetings, when it comes to worship, when it comes to, I mean, even worship like just what Jason does at our church on Thursday nights. For our church, we purposed that something would be happening, some sort of a programming would be happening on an evening, ideally throughout the weekdays, because the reality was that something is happening at our church. One day a week at least, there's something going on. Whether it's like the Wednesday night stuff, or it's a small group is meeting, or a men's group, or people are coming together to work on a mission project, and there's always that contact. So we wanted to almost overshare and overdo to make sure that people were still doing that. Now, as we start to come back, some of that stuff has to stay in place, I think. But when it comes to the preaching and stuff,
you can't pull the rug out from everyone.
No, you can't. Those things have to stay in place. And in the back of my head, I think from this point forward that even though even though our goal is to get back to life as normal, I think the reality is that with this, we it sounds trite, but we liken it to how the flu is. The flu is like very, very dangerous, and we constantly every year a big group of us get it's not a vaccine, but it's kind of like a booster to kind of help your body, build up some immunities to it. And some of us have the flu this year and don't have the flu next year. We have this type of thing, but when it's flu season, we're all really careful about things. We make sure we don't hug and do things like that. In this case, with COVID, it ends up being like the flu on steroids, where depending on where you are yourself, health wise, it could be an annoyance. It could be like having the flu, or it could send you into a death spiral. And I think that we will probably end up being in a position, church-wise and communities-wise, where there's going to be seasons throughout the course of a year where we have 100% of our people that are attendance regularly, and then we get to a point where there may be a couple of months, 8-10 weeks or something, where a portion of them are now doing virtual church. And virtual church almost... And virtual church and real church almost become something that is either cyclical or that is just continuously going on. Do you see that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that like right now we have a survey out, and we anticipate about a third. We've been less concerned about counting people or counting stats,
right,
and more concerned about making sure all of our people are accounted for.
Right.
So we had
like
our
that.
outreach pastor and his team call everybody in on our church roll, and even people beyond that, so to speak. And so we're not worried about when it comes back, like, is it if our median was this, are we going to keep that threshold? We don't know. I think it's going to be a while before I don't know what it's going to look like. We could gain more because we've had a bigger footprint by online, or we could lose people over this because people are now afraid to get out, or maybe people felt like they were disconnected or whatever. We just don't know what it's going to look like.
Right.
But what we do know is that it's going to be a while. People fall into different categories. Some people believe the whole thing's a hoax and they're ready to come yesterday. Some people are like, I'm going to come, they're in the middle. I'm going to come, but with caution. I'm not ready to put my kids in the nursery yet or whatever. And then some people are like, I'm not going to come for a while. I want to see things flesh out. And some people are like, I'm deathly afraid to leave my house ever again. So You have four groups. We're a church with hundreds of people on a roll. We're going to have people from all four groups. Our goal is to reach all of them where they're at. That's what Jesus did.
Right.
He walked into the room with Thomas. Thomas was in doubt. Jesus went into the room and showed him and cured his doubt by loving him and meeting him personally. We're going to meet people personally, be it through on campus or online, and and I've told our staff this, our job as a church is to help lead our community to get back to looking at people like they're not biological weapons, because we've been told the last couple months, don't stand next to people, don't talk to people, don't touch stuff, and you can't live like that forever. That's impossible.
That's right.
And so you have to find a balance. And so I think our churches you mentioned the story brand thing. We like to package everything in Tate Springs in a story, because I think it's warmer than saying, here's our phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. That's great, but that sounds like we're a clinic. Well, we're a church, and we've packaged our reopening as a story, and we said, here's a story God's telling about us reopening. Chapter 1 is we're just getting back together. It's just regathering. We've called chapter 1 the regathering, and we say we're opening the doors. We're going to practice social distancing, but the goal is not to try to get back to a normal immediately. The goal is let's just get back on campus. We started it by having a cookout in our parking lot this past week, and people were just together. That's all it's about. And people need to be around one another again for a while before they start feeling comfortable. And it's going to be, you said, I don't know. No one knows how long it's going to be. We're hoping by the fall that the summer is enough time to rehab, but it could be next year before we, a year after the whole thing started, but that we get to where we're like, oh yeah, everything is, everything has gotten to a point where it's back to some sense of normalcy.
So we've got what me and Dave call the hybrid approach, where we're not, if we're reopening like we get to in Texas and some of the other states in America, we get to reopen and we get to go through those chapters. Some states, some clients that I have are in states where they're not even talking about reopening for another 3 months. They just said, we're sheltering at home. We're here. You're locked down. You can't go out. You should not go out except for groceries. So you're not going to go to church in person for another 3 months. There are places across the world, some international church training academy people that I've talked to, followers that, they're not even looking till the end of the year. So knowing that either we're going to have to take a hybrid approach or we're going to be in this for another few months to the rest of the year, what other things can you suggest or encourage pastors and leaders as they have to deal with, I'm just not going to preach for a little bit longer. I have to, things like, you got to look at the camera. You got to, we always say you have to reply to comments as they come in. So, even if you can't type out a reply, you're saying, hey, Joe, I see you there. Thanks for that message, or thanks for sharing that verse or whatever. Do you have any other quick tips as far as like keeping people engaged and just getting more comfortable while you're just being on camera, whether you're preaching on Sundays, but now you're still doing prayer service on Facebook, or whether you're just doing all teaching on YouTube, Facebook for the next few months? What else do you have to encourage those pastors like, hey, it's okay, let's get comfortable on camera and let's continue forward?
Yeah, I would say it's the same principle that if a pastor came to me and they said, hey, and again, to preface this, I'm no big media guru. I'm just a pastor of a mid-sized church in the Metroplex. But I will say this: the same principle that you use to get used to preaching to people is the same principle that you would use to get used to preaching to a camera, and that is reps. And so the more that you are behind a camera, the more comfortable you're going to get. And so, if you've never been behind a camera, the chances are you're going to feel uncomfortable when you start doing it. And I don't think that ignoring the fact that you're on camera is a healthy approach for the way the world's going. If you want to do effective ministry, you have to understand that you're going to be behind a camera. We're in a social media generation. I like video games, and so like there's a live stream community, and these guys know how to deal with being on camera. They're engaging an online audience where they're reading the comments, but also, doing their job at the same time. I've learned from them. And this is why I love Wednesday nights the most, because it's super casual. We're not trying to act like we're not on camera. Dave is producing behind the camera and I'm interacting with him. And people have responded to that better than anything, because they just feel like they're part of it, even though they're not in the same room. But
it's
the
more
same
authentic.
Principle, yeah. And so I would just say, just do reps. And so whether it's you doing a video, like a live video Bible study, or just saying, here's a morning devotional, or whatever, I think that right now, in order to be effective, like we're already having conversations about how outreach ministry is changing. There's already been controversy around the idea of do you go and knock on doors and all that, or not controversy, but there's been discussion about the effectiveness of that. I think that right now people mentally are going to be less inclined to interact with strangers in any context or capacity. And so our outreach ministry is going to need to be more virtual and digital and reaching people through social media. And so, in other words, you have to get used to talking to a camera. And the way that you do that is you look at a camera, treat it like a person, and do it a lot. It's that simple. And you just basically let it be what it is, and us, like I'm the oldest millennial, I'm the older spectrum of millennials. Everyone underneath me, they don't have to be taught how to talk to a camera. They're used to it. They do that all the time. I was kind of like in the middle. I have one foot in two generations. I'll illustrate real quick and I'll kick it back. I remember I used to love American Idol, and I used to watch every season. And there was this one season where I saw a change. There was David Archuleta and David Cook, I think, were the two finalists. And one David was super comfortable behind the camera, and he ended up winning. The other Dave was not, and he was more talented, and he was not used to talking to a camera, and he lost. And it was because the one, even though he didn't have as much talent, he was able to engage better.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that stuck with me. And I think that we're living in a time where we need to be able to engage people even though they're not in the room. And unless we do that, we're going to be missing a lot of opportunities to connect people to Christ.
You know, that reminds me, for the older pastors out here, which we have a lot. We have a lot of pastors that are, you know, my age or above. It's historically it's that American Idol moment was the debate, the presidential debate between Nixon and John F. Kennedy. It was the first televised debate, and Kennedy was good on camera. He used the camera, he worked the camera, he communicated, and he came across with the appropriate amounts of charisma. And Nixon wasn't, and he came across as staunch and stuffy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and robotic and stuff. And that's, you know, that was moving into the TV generation, and we've seen how, you know, politicians and celebrities and everybody else have gotten more comfortable being on television. That's what we're doing now. We're basically all on television, and you know,
same as Bill Clinton.
Yes,
yeah. Bill Clinton looked at the camera and said, "I feel your pain."
Exactly.
And he won.
Exactly, and he also went on Arsenio and played the saxophone, you know, and had fun.
Yeah.
Which you know, the analog of that in church media is the spontaneous live stream that you do from your phone, when you just grab your phone while you're setting up the stage, or while you're coming back from lunch and going back in to finish your sermon prep or something. And it's just, I had a thought, and you just, you know, you do that type of thing. Just want to say hi to everybody. I'm thinking about y'all. I'm praying about y'all. You know, this funny thing just happened to me. Whatever it is, that little thing is what builds the audience. And we do that in churches by going to lunch with different families after church, you know, or having them over, or doing small fellowships and doing things like that. And in a world where we're moving to you know, we've had a lot of social interaction online for for a decade or more. But now that is becoming, for some people, that is becoming not just an alternative for introverts to hide in. It is becoming a necessity for maintaining communication with family, maintaining communication with work, with friends, with all that. And all of that is kind of merging together. And I mean, it's going to have to take like a nuclear blast or an EMP or something for all this to go away. It's just a part of life right now. So I want to encourage pastors,
or a virus from space,
right? Or the worm stampede. I mean, it's going to be.
Don't you put that on us, Jared? Don't you put that on us?
Yeah, it's not June yet. The worm stampede is coming.
We have enough problems with Earth viruses. If I can throw a couple things out there just before we wrap up. We talk. By the way, this will show you how young I am. In my history textbook I believe it was in middle school. It might have been early high school. But in my history textbook, towards the end, was a picture of Bill Clinton playing the saxophone. So that'll tell you how young I am.
Wow.
Although if you ask my daughter, I'm old. But yeah, that was in a history textbook. So being relatable, you know, we talk about depending on how far you've dug into your church communications, you know, you talk about how, you know, we want to tell jokes on stage. We want to show our interests on our website. You know, pastor's a hunter. I'm a hunter. Maybe that'll connect with people.
Star Wars references. That's what Jared does all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not a hunter. I'm a warrior or a mage. Oh, we're not. Oh, you're talking about real life.
No. As long as you're not a ranger. The modern day equivalent to that would just honestly be not even let's sit down and let's, you know, have a nice background and let's talk to the camera. No, it's, hey guys, pastor here. I'm going to go barbecue. Let's come with me. And you're just sitting there with a phone for 30 minutes while you grill up some hamburgers for the family. And you're talking about, you know, this is how my dad taught me, you know, you don't flip the burger more than once. You know, you flip it for a couple minutes, put the cheese on, let it get nice and melty. Maybe here's how I do a Juicy Lucy. Or, you know, someone comes on and is like, no, I like my burgers flame broiled. And you're like, all right, well, let's kick up the fire and let's flame broil the burger and let's have a taste test here on stream. And let's, you know, that's relatable.
Mm-hmm.
One of my former pastors, used to go outside and just do coffee and the Bible in the morning, and then he moved away. But some guys still wanted that. They wanted to do that with him, so he got a 360 camera and was just put it on his patio and was like, "Hey, let's just talk about the Bible." And the things that people realized was Pastor has kind of the same questions we do. He would read a passage and he would say, "Man, like this is what Ecclesiastes sparks in my mind," and he's asking these questions and meditating on them, and you're like, "Man, Pastor's just like us." And we're Baptists, so we think we all have the same authority under the Spirit and all that. But it was very relatable, and we saw that Pastor has to work through things. He doesn't just have all the answers. He has to work through things and meditate on things and ask the same questions as we do. And so that was very relatable. But then also, as you're leading your congregation digitally, I would encourage you, and me and Dave say this with a lot of things, with design, with video production, media, but especially you as a pastor, you should be watching and listening to other pastors and other people. Jared probably has taken a lot more from Twitch streamers than other pastors online. But you could also, for the older folk, and even myself, I think whether you agree or disagree, I'm going to get in trouble for this in the comments, I'm sure.
Awesome.
A great example of how to talk to the camera, audio wise, as far as talking, go listen to Rush Limbaugh or listen to other talk radio hosts.
Yes.
You will and actually start listening for the silences, and you'll realize they don't say something as much as they do say something. So you can listen to how do those breaks happen, because it's awkward when you are, it's fine when you're on stage and you ask a question, it's who here likes to put chocolate chips in your pancakes? Okay, all right, how about pecans? And then you're sitting here on camera and you start talking to fill the space. Do you like to put chocolate chips on your pancakes? Because I want to know, because this is what no, you just sit there and ask the question, hey, do you put chocolate chips on your pancakes?
Answer me.
What about pecans? Have you ever tried it with M&Ms? I feel incredibly awkward because each one of those silences is like 5 minutes in my head.
Right.
But you listening, you're working through it in your head, and it doesn't happen as fast. And so you can watch these Twitch streamers, talk radio hosts, podcasters, and kind of get their rhythm. And you realize that there's a lot of pausing that we do in live preaching that can easily carry over into the video. You just have to get comfortable with it and kind of experiment with that. So, don't be afraid to ask questions on video. Don't be afraid to have long silences. My mentor, when he does live streams in our Facebook group, he'll just ask a question and he'll just sit back and for 2 minutes just watch people answer in the comments, and he won't say a word. And there's 700 people in the group, and all 700 of them are watching and commenting. And he's just, hey, tell me, what do you, what would he say? He would ask a paradoxical question, like if you need a college degree, this is a business guy, but he'd be like, if you need a college degree to make money, why are the 5 richest CEOs college dropouts or something like that?
Right.
And he would just sit back for 2 minutes.
And just let the chat go crazy.
And just let the chat go crazy.
And it's genius because what he's doing is he's inviting them. They're not just a person in the audience who's watching someone else. They're actually part of the program, and that's what people want. They just want to feel like they're a part of it, whether they're in the room or not.
Yeah.
And it's never just you, because Dave, as we go live in the church training, as we do the Church Media Guys show live, the chat is having conversations with other people in the chat. They're all helping each other out, because you and I, we only have so much bandwidth, and we have stuff we want to talk about, and you have a sermon that you want to preach. But if someone comes in and says, hey, it's my wife's birthday, or hey, I need prayer or whatever, the chat can interact with the chat just as the people in the foyer in the church in person interact with other people in the foyer outside of your sermon. Like, that's okay. Give them that avenue. And, just like we watch the Twitch streamers, just take a look at the comments every once in a while and say, oh, hey, man, hey, Joe, thanks for watching, man. Carol needs prayer. Let's do it. Or happy birthday, Carol. You just have to get comfortable with it, play around with it. We got the Church Media Hacks group. If you have questions about the context of your live stream and what you can do better, ask the questions there, and we can guide you in that. This is a process, and this is a transition, and this is something new we're going to have to learn that seminary did not prepare us for. In fact, who wants to start a pool on whether or not, first of all, if you think gambling's okay, who wants to start a pool on whether or not seminary is going to start teaching digital preaching classes or something like that, media classes? We already have church music degrees are teaching improvisation and worship band stuff now. So maybe seminaries will have video stuff as well. Any other final thoughts on transitioning and becoming more comfortable on camera as we either continue preaching or more likely go back to the in-person church model, but also continue the digital stuff we're doing now?
I want to see Jared, and I fully expect it, and I'm going to yell from the balcony if I don't hear it. I want to hear Jared when he's preaching to say, when he asks a question, to say, leave a comment in the chat. I would like to hear, leave your answer in the chat. I want to hear that, and I want to hear more pastors doing that. We do that, because we're doing this medium and stuff. It's no different. We ask these questions, and when you ask a question, how many of you have ever fallen off your bike and skinned your knee? Hands go up in the audience and stuff. The next thing is at the end of that, you say, leave that let me know in the chat. Say I did, or say skin knee if this has happened to you.
No, my favorite is type a 1 in the chat if that's you.
Yeah.
That's so easy. One, done. Now I'm involved. Now I'm engaged, and it took literally almost nothing for me. I don't have to think about what I'm going to say. Am I going to say it right? Is someone going to, just type a 1 in the chat if that's you. Type a 2 if you skinned your knee rollerblading or something like that. Like you can make it so easy for people to get engaged, and that's just one micro commitment to get them deeper into engaging.
And Jared, to start the service off, I want Jared's face right up in front of the camera, looking at it, and then going, like that.
Yeah.
Good morning.
No,
you don't have to go that far.
Let's not even stop there during the welcome time. Welcome to Tate Springs Baptist Church. If you're here, we are so glad you dedicated your Sunday morning to be with us today. If you're watching online, hit that subscribe button and smash that bell so you don't miss another service.
There you go. Are you taking notes, Jared?
Oh yeah.
Final thoughts, Dr. Wellman.
Man, I appreciate you guys having me on. I think that the idea is just be as natural as you can be and embrace it. Don't try to hide from it. Just welcome it and embrace it, and be as authentic as you can be. I think if you're looking for something that's going to comfort people, just welcome them in as much as you can, and let them be a part of your life, and let them be a part of who you are. And I think that they'll appreciate that. And I think we've seen that at Tate Springs. We've seen people who have been, honestly, I'm amazed that they're amazed that we've just transitioned to online, and they've been so appreciative of it, and I think it's just because we've just offered something that can give them an anchor point in a time when Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and so on and so forth, there's no distinction. The only distinction is really what the church is offering every week. That's how they know it's a different day. And so we think it's got to be this big elaborate thing. It doesn't have to be. Most of us have a smartphone, and we can make a big difference by just hitting the live button and connecting with people throughout the week in that way.
Awesome. Jared, where can people find out more about you?
Our church website, tatesprings.com, is most of, I guess there's a short bio there. Have a Twitter account I'm pretty active on. Jared, handle is Jared C. Wellman. And have a little bit of a blog that I have not updated in a long time, but it's still there because the articles are pretty evergreen. They're theological articles called answersonheaven.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Take everything that you've learned today, consider it, digest it, go implement it, execute it, and go change lives.